Before going into the session itself, indeed, we would like to do a little poll and indeed understand where your company is today. Which kind of focus do you have regarding the response to COVID? Are you first in resolving approach, addressing the immediate challenges of COVID? Are you into resilience, tackling the near-term, cash management challenges and broader resilience issues, or are you already into a return approach where you're planning how to return to our normal business and bring employees back to work? So we can see that about 35% of you are already in return. So a majority is already in return, while only a part, I would say 20%, is in resilience, and a tiny portion is in still fighting the immediate challenges of the crisis. So indeed, our topic here today is precisely about this return and understanding how to deal with customers, is what has changed in the view of customers. But you could ask a question. You could ask, why now? Why focusing on customer experience now? Is this really the time to think about customer experience? Actually, we believe this is actually the time to think about your customers and indeed their experience. Looking at the previous major crisis in 2008, 2009, we could see that those who really focused on the experience of their customers and making sure they could get the best of their company actually were the ones that rebounded and recovered more rapidly than others, and indeed came out much stronger than the others. The return to shareholders from 2007 to 2010 of the CX leaders were about 3 times higher than the ones from the laggards. So really understanding your customers well and preparing for the return and having a through cycle mentality on your customer experience is actually, we believe, something you need to tackle exactly now. So what has changed? What is it that is this next new normal composed of? We believe first, if you have read some of our publications in the past, that customer experience is formed by a simple equation. It's the equation of obviously the quality of the experience you observe from a company, so really what you perceive from them, as well against the expectations you had, right? And in our world, expectations vary, very multiple types of expectations. However, there's a new expectation that surfaced in the last weeks and months. It's the safety. People now expect every business they are interacting with to be a safe experience. And this is something we'll come back to, but safety had probably disappeared unless, except a few situations, safety had mostly disappeared from our expectations. This was a given. It's now back. And I think designing experiences with safety in mind will be paramount in the beginning of your next normal. Then there are next experiences. There are things that where you need to reimagine and find new offerings, new products that will meet this new type of expectations from customers. We'll come back to that, but we thought that framing the conversation with this safe experiences and next experiences is extremely interesting to shed light on what's coming up. I would like now to introduce the 2 parts that we are going to tackle in this session. First, Constance will cover what drives the new normal, this next normal. What is it composed of? What are the expectations, the new expectations from customers? And then Stéphane will cover what is needed from companies, what is needed in terms of investment, in terms of activities to adapt to this changing customer experience landscape. Constance, over to you.
Thank you, Nico. So we wanted to take a bit of time to understand what is going to drive the next normal. And what we mean by this, given we don't have a crystal ball, is a bit understanding what's happening right now and what are the assumptions that we can take to kind of build and understand what is going to happen next. So first, we just wanted to kind of take a step back and look at what was happening. So if we look at what's happening in Europe, and also if we take pointers from what's happening in China, assuming they're a bit in advance, we'll see that a lot of people are still concerned, be it about their safety, but also about what's going to happen next. So typically when asked, we see that more than 30% are very worried that this crisis is going to have a long and lasting impact. We also see that people are quite worried, so indicating a bit of a change in paradigm. More than 70% of people are actually worried about their finances and feel that they need to be careful about their spending. And interestingly, even if China is a bit in advance compared to Europe, we still see that these things are sticking. If we look at it in terms of why are people concerned, I think this is quite interesting. When you ask people about what they're concerned or very concerned about, you can see that indeed more than 60% of people are concerned about safety. And this is the safety of themselves, like the safety for themselves, for their family, but also the overall public health. Which is interesting, this, building on this, is that as Nicolas was saying in the beginning, you need to think about how to build safe experiences. First, because, well, obviously, in times of confinement, you need to build the experience that allows for your business to continue. And we've seen a lot of companies innovating and or adapting to be able to build on this. But also, you need to build, bearing in mind that safety is going to be a primary concern for people going forward. So it's not only about being able to do it's required to build safety into the whole DNA of the experience, at least for a bit of time. It's surprising to see that still a lot of people believe that it's going to take more than 6 months to go back to normal. Going beyond safety, what do we see in terms of how customers are reacting? We've all heard about it. We can see that digital engagement has accelerated quite tremendously. So just to give a bit of a few numbers that were quite interesting, in France, 47% of workers have started working from home. Before the crisis, only 6% of people used to do it regularly or even occasionally. So we can see that across generations, across sectors, across types, consumers have started to engage and use digital for all of their activities. We see that the companies have also innovated quite heavily to go for and offer digital options to replace or complement traditional experiences. Out of this, we can all think about meals and groceries, so a lot of restaurants and or distributors thinking about how can you do contactless delivery, how can you offer the options to do online orders, fitness and health apps that I've seen a surge in usage. Of course, entertainment and media, more than 30% have started using streaming options. So basically across the board, a lot of new options are being used out of necessity or out of convenience. So what can we take from this? I think it's interesting to think about what's the next normal going to be like. We can think about it in two ways. So on the vertical axis, the idea is to say what has been the growth in terms of users since the crisis of the COVID. So bottom left is basically low user growth since the COVID-19 crisis. And then on the horizontal axis, there's a question of, are you doing it out of necessity or are you doing it out of convenience and or before you like it? So basically on the right, we believe these are habits and or usage that have the potential to stick. Obviously, it's interesting to understand what is going to be on the top right of this matrix. So basically the fast accelerator, so high-performing replacements for traditional in-person experience that are very likely to persist in the next normal versus the things that are going to go back to normal. We need to look at what happened and the way experiences have changed to understand what has been the user growth and what is the intent. So typically, if we look at least what consumer surveys say, we believe that, for example, telemedicine has a very good potential to stick because basically a lot of people have started using it and a lot of people say, well, it's actually convenient and I would like to continue even in the post-COVID world. I think it's interesting to look at it to basically ensure that your company understand what is likely to be fast accelerators or things that have the potential to stick versus things that are really driven by the circumstances and that are not likely to continue after the crisis, to make sure that you're positioning yourself and your investments in the right-hand quadrants.
Perfect, thank you. So if we go from here, mapping a little bit of an understanding what is driving the next normal, the question is, in this period now where you're looking at safe, you're looking at stabilizing everything, and you're also starting to lift your view a little bit looking ahead, it's going to be crucial to be thoughtful where you place your investments and sort of keep an eye on the changing landscape as you start reimagining what you would like customer experience to be like. And starting out from this idea of safe experiences that we think will continue for some time, as COVID plays out, as people are maybe also more aware of viruses in general coming back, safety will be very important. And safety is, of course, important for your employees as well as for your customers. And from a design perspective, we see that it's not only the physical safety of clean surfaces and spatial distancing or time distancing, but it's also about the psychological feeling of safety and creating trust. And I think for customer experience, that going forward is going to be incredibly important. And it plays out in shopping and travel, and all the different ways you as a company interact with customers. And I guess that many of you have read Yuval's books about humans evolving and the future of humans, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And I think this quote is quite interesting, taking a step back, looking how Homo sapiens might evolve, and also see that some things that are happening now, they were meant to happen before. Like many digital developments that we wanted to happen are now accelerating. And we see that often in crisis, that things that were already underway all of a sudden get a boost. But also things that we are now experiencing will have actually an impact how we see things and what matters. And especially coming out of distance, there will be a longing for human connection. There will be a longing for experiencing things. But there will also be an idea that certain experiences that we've seen now are actually much better now that we've gotten used to it. So as usual, future expectations are being shaped not just by what your company is doing, but also all the other great experiences that your customers have all around. So when we talk about next experiences, this is really in all dimensions rethinking from a customer point of view, how would they like to interact with you? And as this is quite a dynamic, fluid equation, a big part, I believe, is also building strong relationships with your customers, being there where they are now and being there where they will be tomorrow. And I think, setting up an agile way of thinking and way of working around it to stay nimble and continue to learn and continue to stay close is going to be really important. And again, linking that also with your employee experience, supporting your employees to be empowered digitally to still, perform something that really creates value. We've seen in many companies that actually employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction is going up from certain roles working from home. The question is also how sustainable that is. Now it's been a few weeks, but you need to also start thinking about how to stabilize that. And if we look at the concrete actions or sort of smart investments that we see that basically can help you move into the right direction, we see those three things that companies successfully implement right now. One is doubling down on digital excellence. I think that has a lot to do also with alignment around the company, that now many executives see this is actually really important. There are a lot of opportunities now to rethink and double down, you know, what are the expectations going to be and how can we prepare for this new future and make sure we have the digital capabilities to do it. Investing in rethinking touch, rethinking contactless, rethinking safety across product services, but also in the processes that you have to support your customer experience. And then lastly, to think about data and analytics, which means that you're going to be more proactive, more nimble to respond, but also as a learning organization, you know, able to know where things are moving and anticipate customer expectations and customer needs. If we double click on digital, from a customer experience perspective, as we usually see, if you deliver something fantastic, it becomes shareable, it becomes sticky, and people really respond, but it also improves your ROI. So you can decrease your sales cost and in-person activity. So these things are really interesting to look at. When we look at safety, we've come up with a framework to make it a little bit memorable. We called it IDEA. And that is basically to help you think about customer experience from the safe perspective, not forgetting the human touch in a conceptual sense, but really working on physical touch and making sure that we reinforce the feeling of safety. And the first step that we think you need to take is identify what journeys and what touch points are the moments that have the greatest risk. And think about contact between employees, so from employee to employee, from employee to customer, and from customer to customer. So all the different relationships, rethink where's the biggest risk. And then diagnose and prioritize so that it becomes measurable and you can operationalize it and handle your financial risks attached to those most important customer experience journeys. Then design and execute solutions. So think about a roadmap and how to place things on your backlog and think about what you need to do now and what are maybe more long-term things you need to work out. And then also adapt and sustain. So this is, like many customer experience initiatives, a moving thing. Service never stops. So you need to iterate and work with your organization to service design this also going forward. In the example on the right, you have a shopping journey. We see a lot happening in retail, you know, taking out risks in pickup, increasing sort of how employees are educated and supported, offering new ways that the fitting rooms can be connected, and you know, supporting customers with different service options, having the possibility that you can get things delivered or picked up. IKEA, for example, started the option that you can order online and then go to the store and they bring it out to your car. So there are many of these things that we see evolving, and that as new experiences will also stick if they are successful. On the third point, which I also believe is really interesting to get ahead and come out stronger, is the idea of data-driven customer insight. And I'd like Niklas to share that and also share a cool case that we have.
Thank you, Stefan. Indeed, the two dimensions that Stefan presented so far are, let's say, front-end things you need to do to maintain a great experience for your customers. We believe things are moving so fast, and indeed in a little bit of an unpredicted way, that you also need to work on things that are a little bit in the background. And typically, the way you measure satisfaction from customers today, or at least most of you measure today, may be a bit limited for this new normal. So what is the characteristic of these systems today? They are mainly, focused on surveys, right? So by definition, they are relatively limited, right? We calculated that even if you have a large-scale surveys, even touch points, regular transactional surveys, you end up measuring about 7% of your customer base on average, from which you get direct feedback. In most of the cases, you react to customer satisfactions or insatisfactions. So it's only in a few cases that you have a timely activity against satisfaction point. They are ambiguous. Many customer experience leaders told us that they believe the survey is granular enough to act on the messages that they're getting. And it's unfocused because in many cases we don't know exactly what's the ROI of the action you are taking. So we believe there is something that is needed on all these 4 dimensions, something that would be holistic, something that would be predictive, something that would be help prioritizing the right actions and leading to value. We highlighted a few new normal dimensions that we believe you need to tackle now and that are ready to stay, like safety. But there are many others that will appear, and we believe understanding it very thoroughly will be one of the drivers of the leaders in the future. If we go to next page, so we believe what do you need to do today? We believe you need to think about customer experience in a very thorough manner, right? And start now thinking about what this next normal is, right? Indeed, and as you can see on the right of this page, start working on your digital excellence. Obviously, a lot of these contacts that exist today are likely to be digitalized. It works well, it accelerated digital interaction, and it is safe. So anything where you have blind spots in digital, this is probably the right moment to work on the priority journeys to digitalize. Some of them actually need to be completely reinvented, but also look at your digital capabilities to identify some of these blind spots. But broader than digital, which is a tool at the heart of it, we believe you need to really think about safety and contactless engagement, safe and contactless engagement. So what are the interactions you have with your customers today? The metrics that Constance was showing, what are the things that are just a burst for the moment and not likely to stay versus things that are really where there has been a transition? And look at this not in the context of all the economy as we've done it here, but in the context of your organization. From your interaction with customers, what are the ones that could be contactless? What are the ones that are actually essential to have in terms of counseling customers or bringing advice where there is a real value added of the interaction, and redesign these other ones, right? Retail has to think about this very carefully, for example. What could be contactless, what needs to be in person. And then, as I highlighted at the end, think about insights generation and action prioritization, and think about it at a new level. Those companies that understand customers better are the ones, and faster, are the ones that are likely to be the next customer experience leaders. So find the right data that you have, develop the algorithms to understand what customers are thinking when they are experiencing these different operational KPIs, match this with their actual satisfaction that, yes, you will still measure by survey, and build from there a new interaction strategy with your customers. We would like to move now to questions, and we received a few questions, and maybe I will start with the first one, where indeed there was a question about environmental and social and governance topics, and whether this new normal is impacting an evolution on ESG topics. I think yes. I think this was a move. I mean, maybe this is not a behavior change as the others, but this is a societal change that has been also accelerated. If we take the metrics that Constance presented, it has been accelerated by the crisis, and it's probably here to stay. Companies need to have a higher purpose, a higher role in society, and I think now this crisis has highlighted this role even more. So now, how does it play with safety? I think that safety is, if you think in terms of basic needs, is actually quite fundamental. It was a little bit forgotten. If you think now customers, it's back there. So I think it's not at the level of ESG topics. Safety is a very basic need, almost at the level of food. So simply it was forgotten because it's part of our lives, and there is a health system, a basic health rules that were there to take care of safety. I think simply now it's back at the top of the list and reignited as a real basic need. So I think on the safety, it's not going to have a big impact on ESG. On the next experience, on the contrary, I think yes. I think this is an area where the companies will need to show that they do care. They do care about the social impact. They do care about the way they're governed and the way their purpose is actually towards customers, and their purpose is towards the society in a broader sense. There is a question on the economic impact of the new normal. The question of delivering what customers want versus cost and desirability of these products. I don't know, maybe Constance, do you want to have a go at this question?
Sure. So it depends a bit on how you think about it, but as you were saying, Nicolas, I think it's important to think about what can you take out from the current situation to decide on how you want to prioritize and where you want to double down, basically.
I would add that many of these new experiences are somehow cheaper. If you go to digital for many interactions, actually the cost of interaction is going down, as you could imagine. Now, this has a broader economic impact about employment, which may need to be rediscussed, and where this surplus of work can be engaged. But the cost for a company of these interactions may actually be cheaper. Right? The contactless is relatively cheaper. On the desirability of products, that's going to be a different game. Obviously, some of the products that were in demand from the society might be less in demand, simply because people hesitate, at least in the near future, to consume them, or it's simply impossible to consume. But I guess some return to the normal will come. So I would say that the cost versus return will change, that's sure, but not it doesn't have to be a higher cost. Safety measures will probably add some costs, And we can see this everywhere with advertising spend being done now on many of the agile brands are already starting to communicate on their how safe they are. I was seeing a car repair company yesterday that was actually highlighting how they now clean and safely clean cars before they hand it over to you after the repair, and insisting. I mean, 2/3 of the advert was actually on this, rather on their ability to repair, which I thought was very agile to communicate on this right now. So the balance of cost and return will change. You're absolutely right. Costs may go up in certain situations, but also may go down, as I was saying. And the return will change. The demand part will obviously change. So you need to test for the return of the demand for your product. There was a question on which are the 3 first things you would suggest a big company to focus on in the journey to safety. Stéphane, do you want to take go at this question?
Yeah. I think that's what we've been thinking a lot about, and in one sense, the way we think around it is that in many companies there are so many things going on, and people are getting more burdened and stressed than we might have thought. So I think one first thing to do is to carve out a little bit of time to actually dedicate to what is next, right? So whilst a lot of thinking is going on how to respond and how to return, to make sure there is some time also set aside to rethink and reimagine. To make sure you do that in parallel, because you have to start doing that, but also because we've seen that creates a lot of enthusiasm and energy and sort of balances a little bit the focus. So I think like with many CX efforts, it's about thinking about who are the stakeholders that you really need with you to have a holistic view at this. Maybe partnering with HR to also think about the employee part of it and how employee experience and customer experience can team up. And I had one client that they have launched a 1-week hackathon. It invited their most strategic partners to join them to think ahead a bit jointly. That could be a good way of also getting extra energy and extra support. And then, of course, radically prioritizing and focusing on the things that, especially for the next, also can bring revenue. There will be probably a cost question for many businesses now. And I think that's one important discussion to have, how to balance sort of radical cost rethinking, but also making sure that you have a few initiatives in place that secure growth. And that's why I think digital is exciting, because you can tap into growth that is already happening, but also anticipate a little bit where you want to play next, like Constance said in the beginning.
Thank you. We got another question which I think is very interesting, and maybe you can have multiple perspective, Constance and you, Stéphane. A question of balance. Should we be more focusing on digitizing things to counterbalance in a way the economic crisis, or should we be more focused on customer experience to somehow increase revenues? Constance, a view on this?
These things are not necessarily contradictory. They can go together, but in a sense where you feel that digital can be a way also to decrease cost and decrease cost to serve, it's true that now is a good time to try and nudge people towards new behaviors. So to give an example is a bit around, like, can be taken for telemedicine or also for banks. It's a bit that people were quite reluctant to try and test the experience of the VC to get advice, be it on health or being on financial products, because these were felt as very complex and requiring human interactions. And right now, we're seeing that we've hit the target, at least for health, virtual health, that we had set 3 years ago. And people say that they're actually going to use it again. Obviously, it's probable that it's not going to be the norm, but it was actually a good way to get people to try it and see that it was actually something they could use. And typically, banks are also thinking about, okay, how can we take advantage of that time to try and build new habits? So not saying this is going to replace everything, but it's also a good time where you can actually try and build good experience that you actually want your customers to have, because these are more cost effective.
Yeah. Another thing I would say to build on that, to not think about digital and physical as two different realms, right? There is this concept of phygital that merges phygital as digital and physical. Whatever you call it, to think omni-channel and see which experiences can be complemented and augmented and strengthened, and make sure the human touch is there and customer experience excellence is there also fully digitally. And you can have digital empowerment in the physical interactions that you provide. When we come back, I predict that physical will play a role again. When people are allowed to go out, they will jump around like happy people in spring. So we need to think about humans holistically, right? This has been a situation that, especially for the new generation, is the first time in their lives that they've seen anything. So I think that is very interesting to also think about how somebody has coined the Generation C that is, totally formed by this Corona experience. What is the next generation expecting? They have grown up much more digitally savvy, but you also see that now generations that we thought of as sort of very offline are very natural and are trying now things, and once they've tried, they probably won't go back. So understanding that mix, the human perspective, I think is key. And I had a few clients that asked last few weeks, if you want to do research, how do you do that? It's obvious that you can do surveys when people are at home, but can you also get a deeper connection with them? And what we've actually found with our ethnographic research, that interviewing people when they're at home is fantastic. The camera is already built in, so it's much more natural to film it and share the empathy with your colleagues. They're in their home, so they're a lot more comfortable when you're having a conversation with them. So we've had fantastic results, almost better than visiting people in real life if you adjust your method slightly. So I think this is also a time to connect and show your customers that you care, invest extra into that connection and relationship. And then maybe also not just think about transactions and moments and touch points, but think about the experience end to end, where it's end to end with capital E's on both sides, and you think beyond what you're doing, and you understand what happens before and what happens after, and think about loyalty and relationships. Because I think the brands, Nico mentioned purpose. I think the brands that deeply connect and sort of bring their purpose to the relationship and are there for the long term, those are the ones that combine, probably to your question, a digital and customer experience excellence in one fabric.
Maybe adding just a comment to Constance and Stéphane. I think if you step back, the use of digital has been very simplistic so far. In simple terms, people have automatized basic interactions with the customers, reordering or signing up for a simple product, or asking a very simple servicing question, support question, and so on and so on. But there is an whole area that hasn't been explored of high value interactions, like the one we are having now, which we believe is high value. It's our point of view. But high value interactions with your customers through digital and contactless manners. Digital doesn't have to be the sort of cheap way of interacting with customers, but on the contrary, you could imagine a bank that is actually giving more advice and more pointed advice by leveraging digital instead of relying on a good old physical one-to-one where you're waiting 10 days to see your relationship manager in a bank branch, looking a bit old or definitely not fashionable. So there are many things to still explore on this opening between customer experience and digital, and McKinsey is ourselves we're tackling with it quite strongly. There was a quick question on the number of, on page 11, someone had a question about the number of people we interviewed. So the answer is 5,000 for the person that has asked the question. And it was done across Italy, Spain, Germany, France, and the UK. So about 1,000 panel in each of the country. Good. Stéphane, Constance, any other questions from your side?
No.
Very good. In which case, I want to thank you for your participation, for your questions. Hopefully this was useful to you. Don't hesitate to contact us if you have further questions. You have our names and addresses there. And obviously, for those who asked, we will share the documents and the document, this one or the previous ones, with you in case you ask. Thank you very much and hope you have a great day.